Pastor Troy, and you're on the dock right here, and we're excited to be here in part 2 here. And I just want to tell you, we're all about these conversations to propel your faith out of the shallows and into the deep. So get ready to go. We're going to do that. We got good start in part 1, and we're going to get much deeper in part 2. You're just going to love it here. And if you're on the dock, you're watching us now, we'd love to have you stay in with us. We do podcasts every Tuesday and Thursdays, but we're also available on these other podcast platforms. Please find some of the other platforms. They may be advantageous to you if you're in your car or if you're downloading things or where you're at. Maybe you have a plan, but find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Facebook, Roku. Roku is great on TVs. Download the SermonNet app through Roku and then look for the On the Dock with Pastor Troy channel. You can also find us on Rumble. Rumble, you can get that app on your smart TVs as well. SermonNet can go on your smart TVs as well. You can find us all those places on the dock with Pastor Troy. Also, our social media partners, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Telegram. And when you find us, please share, subscribe, like, hit notify. And we'd love for you to communicate with others that you're watching us and invite them to join us because we got some great stuff. And by the way, we want you always to think about being a sponsor or partner. We use Patreon. Go to Patreon, download their app, and you can find On the Dock with Pastor Troy, and you can become one of our sponsors. Let me show you this fine coffee cup. We'd love to have you become one of ours. We'll send you one of these, and you can become a partner. That means you're just part of the team here, and you could also be a sponsor. Maybe you have a local business or something, and we can talk about what you're doing, get you on the show. Actually, we'll get you on the show and talk to you about what you're doing for the kingdom of God and how you live. And we want to be a part of your life as well and bring value back to you. And all these things, you can go to onthedock.org. That's our website, and you can find our links to our Patreon site as well that way, or our platforms. You can find our embedded viewer there and all kinds of things. And you can always email us at info@onthedock.org. And if you email us, Donna Kanuski, our executive producer, would be glad to receive that. She'll get it to the right department, and we would love to answer your questions and help you out any way we can. If you get some sort of show notes or something you heard on the show, you just want feedback, information, contact point, we'd love to do that. Email us again, info@onthedock.org. And we're ready to go here, and we've got our On the Dock team around the table here. We got, to my right, Mother Beth here with us in studio. Mother Beth, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, honey.
Haley's still here. She's hanging back there in the back corner right now. Haley, how you doing?
Good.
Haley,
how are you guys?
Haley Ottolini's ready to go. And we're in a second part of our series, the U.S. Church and Anti-Human Trafficking Work in Thailand series. We're in part 2. We have our incredible guest here, Ruth Jaensubhakij here, and she hails from Harvard College. She's a rising senior there, and she is doing a study in this area, and we're going to pick her brain apart because, hey, she's learning a subject that we're all interested in. This church, Community Faith Church, our partner foundation, Hands Hope Foundation, we've been involved in anti-human trafficking, especially sex trafficking in Thailand, and we've got some partnership churches there and organizations we work with, and that's how we cross paths with Ruth, and we want to learn more about what she's learning. It'll help us better in the game. And also Haley, who's our co-host here at the table, she's also got a ministry of her own called the Mosaic Initiative, and they're networking organizations trying to help sustain and support that. I'll throw her graphic up here real quick. Haley, I put this in the package. Look at that. The Mosaic Initiative.org. Check them out as well, and we'll have podcasts about her. Look up in our index. You can always go to YouTube or our SermonNet and look at our archives and find out more about that. And we're also going to have Ruth in as our co-host on the Tamar Series Project. The Tamar Series Project, Tamar Center in Thailand. She's also taking a look at that organization. That's how we got connected. So she'll be our co-host in that, helping us talk to the Vopals there. That's a great show. You do not want to miss that. And so we've got a lot going on. We're going to dig back into the subject today. Ruth, how are you doing? Glad to have you again on the dock.
Doing well. My voice is holding up surprisingly well.
Doing very well. Mine is, for those of you who don't know, I'll pull the curtain back. We've done about 12 podcasts with this young lady. She flew in. She's here for about 4 days. So we have,
that's right.
That we've put together, we've used her on multiple sex trafficking, anti-sex trafficking, because, she's studying this. We have Haley's ministry here. We're involved in that. And to be able to get this kind of a panel together is kind of a cool thing. So, and the fact that she survived her flight in on, what's the name of our airline again? I can't remember. Cape Air. It didn't seem, why Cape Air? I know they've also got planes up in the Capes. I'm thinking Cape Air.
Isn't it Cape Girardeau?
Cape Girardeau is what I would think.
I don't know.
Because there's not really.
Yeah, they're probably Cape. I always think Cape Cod. You ever seen Cape Air at Cape Cod?
No.
No, it's Cape Girardeau.
They do fly from Boston. I saw their little stand in the Boston airport, but I'm not sure where they're going.
I want to tell you, I'm sure the Cape Air is not Cape Girardeau. I'm sure it's Cape Cod.
We can look it up
Their
after.
airline started
look it
there.
up right now.
That's going to Google that. I am almost
Yeah,
sure.
Google
Or
that.
let me say this.
It's worth it.
Duck, go it.
There you go.
You might get, you never know on Google. You Google stuff down, they kind of hide stuff. You don't know stuff, Have you found at all? This is a bonus question. We haven't started yet. Have you found as you study anti-sex trafficking, anti-human trafficking, have you ever used any other search engine?
No.
Okay, I want to encourage you highly. Google's great. It's great, but I am learning that countries and people are hiding subjects today. They are working with Google, whether it's through, you can go the Chinese route, and governments, big business are working a lot with big tech today just to make certain things disappear because it's not attractive to certain businesses. They don't want to harm the social economic and labor pools. And so I would be very interested in studying if you went to like DuckDuckGo or you went to Bing, add to another search engine, and you put the same thing in. I have learned that I get completely different information sometimes because they're filtering out things because it's not their business partners that are buying ad spots. So, well, we don't really want to talk about people from Cambodia working in Thailand as illegal laborers because it doesn't make people want. So it'd be really interesting to see if you got different answers when you looked in different places.
I'm sure algorithm has something to do with a decent amount of it too. It's just like the technology used.
Well, algorithm is algorithm, but algorithms are written by people, and people that write algorithms have agendas.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it would be interesting for you to do
out.
some search on a few things on other things just to see, because, I think a lot of places don't want us to know that these issues are the issues you're studying. People aren't necessarily proud at a national level or a local business level that they've got these issues going on.
Well, and the people that are causing the issue probably don't really want a lot of advertisement about it.
I think also you're going to see, like, to some degree, like, it's going to be hard to see where some location, like some organizations are located and things just because of like their own personal like safety. They're not going to just broadcast exactly where they're at. Like at least some of the groups that I worked with are pretty sensitive.
But I think Ruth probably aware of this.
Information.
But there are a lot of nations out there that highly edit what's going out on the internet and what their people can see and can't see today. I mean, our friends that we go and visit with in on the other side of the world, their nation highly monitors stuff like that. So I'm sure that there's some nations, some business models that just don't want to draw attention to something in a tourist site that might show it as a negative slight. So as you study human trafficking, it'll be really interesting to see what you might find on different search engines running the same searches. So, yeah.
Okay.
Just bonus
I
content.
just need to say,
Yeah.
you were right.
Oh no,
Cape Cod.
Oh,
You were
no.
right and I was wrong. All you have to do is go to Community Faith Church, Psalm 130. Go check out literally July 25th message, and you'll hear all about the understanding in our family of you're right and I'm wrong.
There you go.
Yes.
So Cape Air started there. I thought it was Cape Cod.
Air.
So, hey, you're up there where it is. So you get excited about this. You can get a Cape Air up there and run around.
Now that I know what it's like, I'll be taking it everywhere.
You'd be ready to go.
Their first flight, since our first flight between Boston and Provincetown in 1989.
There you go.
1980.
I'm going to have.
Air has provided year-round service to come to the most beautiful destinations in the world.
Hey, let me just say this way. Give me a good camera. Here you go. Cape Air, we'd love to have you as a sponsor of On the Dock. You can go to Patreon right now. And,
If you happen to be listening.
Yeah, you'd be happy. We actually talk about you, and we could talk more about your stuff. And you go to Patreon and become one of our partners or sponsors. We know one of your offices are here. We'd love to have you. So
I honestly
probably-
thought it was out of Cape Girardeau.
It's probably better than Delta.
yeah, right.
Probably.
I had a
Oh,
great
I
time.
think
All right,
anything's
Ruth.
better than Delta at this point.
Just give us the quick again. Tell us about yourself again and a little bit of your background real quick, if you would, just one more time.
Yeah, so I'm a rising senior at Harvard College. I study social studies, focusing in anthropology with a minor in ethnicity, migration, and rights, and also a Thai language citation, which I don't think I mentioned last
You
time.
did not mention that.
Yeah, studying Thai.
At
Originally
Harvard, you take Thai.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Originally from Singapore, have lived in New York and London, been around.
Speaks a little Thai, speaks a little Mandarin, speaks
Yep.
a lot of good English.
Yeah.
Very gifted young lady
Knows
with a
all the
very
things.
extensive study
How
plan.
does the anthropology work into
Yeah.
what you're doing?
She's studying me, Cro-Magnon man. Right.
I mean, just so people.
Yeah. So I'm
It's a big word.
I'm conducting anthropology is the study of people and cultures, and that can mean lots of different things. The type of research I'm doing is ethnography, which basically means you're looking at different groups. For me, that's people in U.S. churches who partner with, anti-trafficking work in Thailand, and then aid workers at these organizations.
And you're kind of crossing over and seeing how they interact.
Yeah, so seeing what life is like the way that, you all think about these things.
What makes us tick?
Yeah,
kind of-
the different
kind
kinds of issues that you're dealing with, like trying to paint a picture of
Right.
of
great.
what
That's
what
great.
this
That's good.
business is like.
Well, I know if you look at different organizations, and the picture will look different based on what their agenda is and what they're
Yeah.
trying to connect with. So hopefully we end up with a decent portrait. I hope so. Look at this
I don't
face
know.
here, right? Yeah.
She may go home and write it.
She may go home and
terrible.
go, God, they're crazy. yeah.
Well, she's definitely going to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
With the amount of podcasts.
But crazy
we've
good,
recorded.
crazy good, and crazy Uncle Ed are different. I want to be crazy good. Okay, Ruth, give us an interesting conversation point that people might not know about you, or maybe some sort of Harvard. We want some Harvard scuttle. Give us something.
Some
besides-
Harvard scuttle.
I don't know. Give
Okay,
us
well, I think those two things are separate. I'll give you a fun fact about me first.
it could be like, don't eat the broccoli in the dorm cafeteria. It's really garbage.
I'll tell a cool story
Okay,
about something that happened to me there. But yeah, fun fact about me: I really love music. I was a leader at my youth group's like worship team for like 5 years. Back in Singapore, and now like kind of do it for my fellowship and like sing in an a cappella group. So that's what I do when I'm not, thinking about human trafficking.
all
something
have
a
to
little
have
lighter.
something
No,
light.
That
totally.
Kind of,
No, that's like a really.
speak to why her voice is so good on here, because you made.
Oh,
the
she has
comment about-
great voice on
Right.
here.
Thank
yeah.
you.
So you have good
Thank
articulation.
you.
So
You're in
what? So what?
a
What?
cappella
What?
group.
Where do you sing in the scales there? What do you consider yourself?
I can
there's hot.
kind of do whatever. In my a cappella group right now, I'm kind of singing alto, but I've been soprano, mezzo before.
You've been stressed. So we do it like this. Daddy sings bass, Mama sings tenor. You don't know that song, do you?
I do not.
Yeah, you got to. It's an old.
Troy is not our worship.
Daddy sings
pastor.
bass, Mama sings tenor. Is it that way, or does it go the other way?
No, you did. Okay.
I did good. Look up the song. Google the
Okay,
song. Everybody out there.
will
It's a
do,
good
will
old fashioned
do.
song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can tell you have great. You do great on this. You got a career.
Thank you.
You got a career in this coming up.
Wait, she didn't give you the.
Go ahead.
A
Yeah.
fun
No, I want the story. Hey,
A fun little story. Okay, well, this is something that happened to me freshman year. So in the spring of 2019, I was taking a seminar on theoretical physics. It was pass fail, so there was
When did you do this? Your freshman year at theoretical?
Yeah.
Good Lord. I was taking like
Theoretical
pre-algebra.
physics.
It was pass fail, very low stakes, just to discover a new field. It was super fun. Our professor was a pretty well renowned physicist. And I don't know if you would remember, but in the spring, around like April of that year, they released the first ever like photos of a black hole. And so the lab that did that is from Harvard. And the day before the New York Times like released all those photos, we had a guest that we were meeting as a class, and we had someone come in, and our professor introduced. She was like, "Hey, this is one of my former grad students. I like mentored his thesis, and he has something to show you." And he was working in that lab, and he showed us the picture of the black hole a day before the general public got
Wow.
to see it, which
that's
is
really
just
neat.
it was so cool.
You got a preview of the black hole before we got to know where the black hole was.
Yes, exactly.
Only at Harvard College could you get such a thing.
I love to tell that story.
The
It's like one of the
insider
coolest things that's ever happened.
That's really cool.
You've gone before where no other
She
people
stared
gone.
into the void.
Into the void.
I really
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about anti-human trafficking, more focused really here in this series on anti-sex trafficking. And in one of our other series that we did with the Mosaic Initiative, we brought up a definition here from the United Nations, Article 3, Paragraph A of human trafficking. I'm not going to read this.
Pretty lengthy.
We've got it. Well, the reason we got to read it is because people are doing podcasts. So if people are on the audio, one of us got to read it. But let me read it real quick, and then I'll let her explain. The human trafficking, the recruitment, the transportation, because not everybody's watching video. The recruitment, the transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction or a fraud, of deception or of the abuse of power or of a position of vulnerability or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purposes of exploitation. And exploitation shall include at a minimum the exploitation of the prostitution of others, or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Now, you're at Harvard. You're taught to be able to take complex subjects and be concise. The United Nations here really worked hard to give us a thorough, long definition. Can you
Broad.
Can you
for sure.
can you help us with the language here and tell us what your definition would be of human trafficking. Bring it to us from a Harvard perspective.
Sure. I guess I would consider it instances where someone is coercing someone, and that can be through many different forms, into some type of action. It can be labor, it can be sex, it can be, medical procedures against their will, and in exchange for like payment of some sort.
Yeah.
When you think about when you think about this kind of trafficking, and we're going to come deeper to sex trafficking in a minute, but everybody jumps right to sex trafficking really, because I don't know why. Labor trafficking is very big in our country as well. There's lots of abuses there in the U.S. right now, but both these things. But when you think about that, is all the sex industry, by definition, is all of that human traffic? Would all that automatically fall under that? Would you consider all of it coercive?
Well, I think that's a super difficult question.
I know.
Especially like, as we talked about in Haley's episodes, which you should listen to.
Yeah.
Thinking about nowadays, there's lots of forms where, you're able to do things through the internet, where no one is maybe like, grabbing you, forcing you to do anything. Right. So I wouldn't say that like point blank everything is automatically coercive, everything's automatically trafficking, but I think that it can look a lot of different ways. And Daniel from the Tamar Center was actually someone who pointed this out to me. He's saying sometimes from a Western standpoint, if you look at what's going on in Thailand, you maybe wouldn't consider that trafficking, and some people say like, oh, they got themselves into that situation, they chose to come and do this work. And so you gotta look like a layer deeper and think, were they lured falsely? Like, were they promised something that they're not being given? Do they have any other options? Like, what kinds of pressures are on people to make decisions to have this lifestyle?
And that can be family, cultural expectations as well, right?
It can be tons of things. So I really don't know how to answer.
No, I think that, we all know that's a big question.
That's a great answer to it, because it's a really big question. And I think it involves a lot of like asking what is exploitive in nature, and it's hard. Because
I do think people could have their free wills, and they could choose to do this or that with their own bodies if they wanted to. And that's not what I want as a pastor for somebody, obviously, but that's not my decision. We all have free will. But my always question is, if somebody's left with that decision, I just don't think a lot of people in the end, deep down, if you really got them by themselves and they had other opportunities, they would choose to sell themselves first.
Yeah.
Even if they chose of their own free will, did they choose because that was their best choice, or did they choose because that was maybe one of their only choices that they could actually make? Mm-hmm. And so that lets me know that it's not just about free will, but it could be a byproduct of what the socioeconomic status is, what's going on in your culture, what your opportunities are, and all those, and pathways and stuff. What other pathways are there? So
I think it's important to note that like the UN adopted that definition. I think it actually may have been they adapt it quite frequent. Like they've adapted it a couple times.
What they would do is add more words to it.
The reason, they wouldn't cut it down.
Yeah,
the reason they have so many words, and I think this is kind of important for people who are new to this field to understand, is that it's written very broadly because of there are so many different forms of exploitation and trafficking. I think Polaris identified or classified 18 different forms, and so when you're looking at creating legislature and working with governments and creating policies and procedures, et cetera, we want to write that really broadly so that it does encompass these other things, because it used to be really specific and it used to kind of harp more on the transportation and harboring side of things. But
trafficking does make it, like the word trafficking makes you think of like transportation bringing people legally across borders.
Right. But it is the moving of people.
And while there usually is some form of that, whether it's from like this part of town to that part of town or something, it doesn't require that. And so the definitions have like changed and adapted over time as we learn more and as we see what is actually exploitive. Mm-hmm. Because it's messy when you're working in coercion, because I think we talked about this a little bit. I actually spoke off turn, but I think it was helpful in a way to clarify that what sometimes we see, like you said, sometimes from the Western perspective, you'll see it as like what you can see it, maybe what you interpret as consensual was actually, like maybe they have gained complicit action, but it wasn't necessary, like full and true consent,
right?
Because of the coercive nature, or because of the fraud, because of the deceit, things like that are used.
You got to layer all that. This is a very deep onion.
Yeah, Yeah.
Lots of layers, right?
So I think when you ask that question of like all people, like you can look, I've read a lot of studies that like look at how much exploitation is in the sex industry, and it seems by and large most like a lot of situations are exploitive, but I don't think you can say every one of them.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is if you have someone who's in this situation and they want to leave but they can't, like at that point it's
definitely exploitive, definitely coercive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't you know, my background before as a pastor, my degree, my undergraduate degrees and expertise are in economics and finance. So when I see trafficking, I don't see travel, I see economics. So I see human trafficking as the definition of how businesses flow and make money off the abuse of people. How business,
a big part of it too.
Yeah, right. So for me, human trafficking is highly economical. The reason people do it is because it works. It's a cheap source of labor. It's a way to produce
lower
income.
risk, higher reward.
It makes people disposable assets some ways, and they become either liabilities or assets. And it's very dangerous because you reduce people to widgets, you know, and then
product,
product and humanity is gone, and you treat the victim as honestly almost a disposable asset that has a lifespan. We learned that in Thailand and talking to Daniel, that, you know, the prostitutes can come in at as early as 14 or 15, and by the time they're 22, 23, 24, 25, they're aging out and having to get into a different sector of it to survive. But then at the same time, so that asset has a shelf life, and it's almost like that's factored in. So this whole world here is done, and then you have your clients out there, your people, your buyers, so to speak. And you've got, you know, all these perverted people are still customers. And this thing is an economics trade where people, like she said, are being lured in. You're almost recruited. A lot of these girls are literally recruited, almost like we recruit an athlete to a sports school or something, recruited in, and then it's, I guess the glamour is not what they quite thought it was. So we need to understand this is exploitation of people. It's economically using people up. And for the benefit of somebody else's enjoyment, but to be honest with you, anybody that's doing that kind of enjoyment, it's not really doing enjoyment. They're really destroying their own soul. As a pastor, how can you use up another human being, be a part of that, and call yourself part of the family of people, let alone the family of God? You can't do that. So it's the whole thing's a very sad thing, but I really love what you're doing. I want to hear about this real quick. I want you to dial it in for us a little bit more. We got this incredible Harvard brain here. Sex trafficking. It's a subset. Lay this out here. Sex trafficking is a form of human trafficking. It's specifically exploitation of a person for the purpose of sexual nature. Now, sex trafficking look different depending on culture and context, but in every context, the outcome's the same. It's the exploitation of the vulnerable by persons in power, and this is oppression. This is modern day slavery. Give us your perspective as you've been studying this. How would you define what you see as sex trafficking, and how are you looking at that? How do you define that as you get ready to do your paper?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a broad range of what constitutes as a sexual act. And I think, you know, you see that with like escort services, that sometimes it's not necessarily about the physical act of sex, but it's about, you know, someone using you as a sexual object, whether that's for companionship, for, you know, somebody that they can show off to their, you know, to whoever. So I think it encompasses a fairly broad range of activities. But it's where people are paying for someone who is offering, like willingly or unwillingly, their body to be used for sexual purposes.
When you lay this out, now you target in, you're specifically in your work, your study, you're looking at Thailand. Mm-hmm. And that's because you could have picked a lot of places. You could have picked Williamson County. You know, you could pick, because there's sex trafficking taking place here. We've talked about that in our episodes. There's stuff happening all around the world. This is not a new subject. It's been going on a long time. It's an age-old thing, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing. But you chose Thailand, and for your work, what does the sex trafficking industry for you look like in Thailand? All of Thailand's not a big sex trafficking pool. Thailand's a beautiful country. I've been all over the country. I haven't been to Chiang Mai yet. I've got to get there, but it's I do. So it's a beautiful country. Beautiful. But tell us, for you, when you look at this subject, you're bandwidthing down. You've gone from human trafficking to sex trafficking. Now you're sex trafficking in Thailand. What does that look like for you as you take a look at the Thailand world?
Yeah, I think it looks different depending on which part of the country you're in. So obviously your church has done a lot of work in Pattaya and in Bangkok, and that's like a very commercial sex industry where there's these red light districts, bars, you know, women, men, lady boys come from all over the country, from other countries as well, to kind of partake in these bars. And so there's that aspect of it, and that's more in like the metropolitan areas. And it does look a little bit different when you go up into Chiang Mai. So a lot of the groups that are doing work in the north, like they work with ethnic minorities, people who have been trafficked from other countries into Thailand. And there, it's not so much necessarily like the bars. It's not so outward facing, but there are other forms, like maybe more similar to what you might see here, kind of more underground. There are a lot of dangers of children being kind of like lured in or taken, whatever it may be. And so there's a wide variety of ways that trafficking takes place in Thailand.
Very, very interesting. I don't see as much in Pattaya of the ethnic minority version of it. I'm sure it's there. I do remember, I wish I could go back and find the picture of it. I've got it somewhere deep in my stuff. Is my first trip there in 2014. We went there with Dr. Jeff and Dr. Sherry Parks, and we were there to kind of be a part of their son married a beautiful Thai lady, and Gunn and Scott are just a blessing in our lives. But so we got there. It was a culture that I'd never stepped into, and so as we went down from Bangkok was a real wonderful city. Best malls I've ever seen, just incredible shopping experience, massive. The tourism, going around and seeing the different Buddhist sites and learning about that was just incredible. And then going to Pattaya, then seeing kind of New Orleans and San Francisco and Atlantic City and Las Vegas all rolled up into one and double it times 12. And then you got Pattaya, 30 to 60,000 sex workers, 6 to 12 million people coming in to be a part of that world. And you thought, oh my gosh, what happened to us? We fell into a world, slums made up of children that are byproducts of those relationships, and just a whole industry. And it broke our hearts. And that's how we jumped in and got involved. So, but being there, I remember early on, we were walking down one of the soys to go to kind of go do some ministry with another group that we were just getting experience. That's all we're doing. We're getting experience. We're going out to work on the docks there in Pattaya and maybe pass out Bibles or something at that time. And one of the places that had a billboard up, and it listed people by age and ethnicity, and it gave a value and a price to those people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the most devastating things I would see this would have been circa 2014. We're not talking about something from, 1000 BC or from, 1700s, where slaves were bought and sold. We're talking about stuff you would have seen then, maybe right now, today, 2014, marketed on the street, listed by price, and it's like, what do you want? This, or that. It would look like something if you're going to McDonald's to get a McDonald's and you got a list there. I've never really thought about that ethnic minority view of that, and it's just something as me as a Christian, as a pastor, as a dad, I honestly just had to sit down. I sat there for a while. I couldn't process it. How do you process what you're studying sex trafficking? You're 21 years old. You're a brilliant young lady. How do you process this kind of darkness and this kind of abuse of people? You're a woman. Haley's a woman involved in this industry. How do you guys process this and deal with this and cope with this? I, as a father, just want to hurt most people.
Well, honestly, I think at this stage in my research, I haven't had much direct contact. So I've been to Thailand many times, but haven't had the opportunity to go and work with anyone in person. And also, when you're doing research, there are tons of considerations when you're working with not endangered is the wrong word, but like at-risk people groups. And so part of the reason that my research focuses on NGO workers and on people who are part of churches rather than working with people who are coming out of trafficking themselves is because there's so much vulnerability in doing that kind of research, so much potential for, yet another form of exploitation. My Thai's not that great, right. So I haven't personally dealt with as much of I haven't heard as many in-person testimonies, haven't worked in these homes. So I think, I don't know, Haley will probably tell you that dealing with that directly is definitely different, but it is a heavy subject.
It is. I mean, I remember it devastated me. I sat for probably an hour and a half. I didn't pass any Bibles out. I'm like, who needs a Bible here? They don't need a Bible. It just needs to you just wanted to be beamed out on the Enterprise and fly away from this planet because you're embarrassed that humanity would do this, Christian or not Christian. Yeah. No matter who you are, who would do this to our fellow humans? I mean, and how can we get to where we're going to list people by category and say this is the price? It's like we're going to a seafood restaurant and picking out, do I want the shrimp or because it was when you go down to Walking Street, you have the beautiful seafood restaurants that sit on the right side, and you go in and they got all the different live water things, and you get your lobster and you get your crab. Then right next to that, you go pick out your what you want for the night for companionship. And I'm just as we look at this subject, if you're not moved by this, listen, people, listen. If this doesn't get at your heart, it broke my heart. And I wanted to leave Patia and never go back. But somewhere in the process, we sat down and met with people from Tamar Center in an upper room, in a prayer room over brothels. We're in a brothel area over all these brothels going on. And all they asked me was, the workers there said, you know, we're fighting a battle here. They didn't say, they said we're winning because they showed us people that were changed lives. But they said overall, there's 60,000 people here and 12 million visitors. We're probably losing too, but we're winning. And what we're winning is a blessing, and every person's life matters. But mostly we're exhausted. We need a pastor.
Yeah.
I wish they'd never asked me that. If I could go back in time and I could talk God out of putting me in that room, I would probably try, because what I've seen in the last years is just devastating.
Yeah.
So I do think go ahead.
I think it's a type of privilege to be able to see those kinds of things and like you said, like and walk away. And so I think that's what keeps me there.
Yeah.
If
How
that
can
makes
you?
sense.
It's
Because
almost
for
like,
me,
how can you walk away, but you want to?
Yeah, but it's also like for me, and yes, and that's not to invalidate like secondary trauma and the challenges that comes with wanting to serve a population of people who've had similar experiences that maybe you don't share.
Right.
But specifically, like, yes, it's hard. It can be hard to look at. Yes, it can be
Well,
heartbreaking, but like, how could I, like, this is someone has lived that.
Yeah.
Like, this might be me learning about it and hearing about it, and that might be challenging, but if someone is actually living this, like, how can you not want to do everything in your power to empower those people to live a life of freedom and healing and hope? And if we don't have people who are willing to look those things in the face and accept the challenges that come along with it, then like we need a movement full of hand in hand of survivors of exploitation and those who, you know, haven't. I think having survivors in the movement is exceedingly important. But yeah, we need. There's a level of like, yes, is it more comfortable to not be able to not drive down the street everywhere you go and see trafficking?
Right.
I don't live that life anymore. I see it everywhere I go.
Yeah.
And it is hard. And there's definitely, like, I think with any time you're working in philanthropy or counseling or any type of service, like, there's a need for really good boundaries, self-care and things, so that you don't end up doing more. Like you said, like, there's a lot of, when you're working with a vulnerable population, you have to learn how to take care of yourself really well too, so that you don't end up like, we've talked about this a lot, like the importance of being beneficial to those you're serving instead of
you say beneficial to those serving, and I think that's a good that's noble, and that's a good plan. I wish that was my intention when I started completely. I was just unaware of the level of depravity that we have. I mean, I know we're rotten people, and we've all sinned, we're all fallen short of the glory of God. I know there's all kinds of things out there that are horrible and terrible, but to walk in that place and to be there in a different culture and realize that there's evil here, there's evil there, there's bad things. My motivation was when I sat down was Ruth, was that as I looked at the sex trafficking face of what you're studying in Thailand, I could just see what if this were my daughter? My motivation was really primarily me. It's like, my goodness, these are people's daughters. These are people's sons. This is humans. And when I got asked to come back as a pastor, they became people I became connected to. That began to change from just being, you know, a dad there going, my gosh, to all of a sudden go, you know, we've got to see the light come on in this place, and a change there. My motivation changed and my perspective changed as I connected with the culture there and connected with the people there. So hopefully my motivation wasn't bad. I would hope any human would see such injustice and just be sickened. At the same time, then you got to figure out how do I make a difference? I didn't really want to make a difference. I wanted to just go away. And then when they asked me, the thing is, I wish they'd asked for something that I couldn't have done, because I could have said, well, I don't do that, but they asked for something I do. I plant churches. And then I'm stuck with like, oh my. So I can't plant a church here. None of y'all are interested. And then they go like 6 of them say, well, we'll help lead. I thought, oh no, now I'm really on the hook. Ruth, how as you deal with this and you look at the face of trafficking there, just lay down as you're discovering and findings of how do we make a difference? What do you see that could make a difference? What are these organizations doing that are changing things that you think are really valuable and doing the right thing in the streets there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on something really important, which is that when you're doing this work as an aid worker or as someone who's part of a church or an NGO, it's always, I think, difficult to figure out how much of yourself is in that. Yeah. And that can be in terms of your motivations, in terms of what might be driving you away. Like, we've seen across time and space, like so many instances where people are really selfishly motivated to go do this work. They want to boost their own ego. They have an agenda that they're trying to push. They want to be the hero. They want to be the savior. And so that's obviously the wrong way to do it. And if you have none of yourself in the work too, I think it's, you get so detached. You're not able to form meaningful relationships with people. You're losing yourself in the work. And so I think when people are able to like have community and like deal with everything that they're like all the challenges that they face in their day-to-day work in a healthy way, going to counseling, whatever it may be, that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. You see that a lot. I mean, I think there's a level, just like in any like responder, like even like you're thinking ambulance, first responders, like different things like that. Like there's some level of compartmentalization that has to happen so that you can do the work that you need to do. Because I can't stop and throw up or cry or respond in a way, like put my emotions on someone who's disclosing their trauma to me, like, and have them carry the weight of my emotion on that. So there is a level of compartmentalization that like probably has to happen so that you can do your job and do it well. But like the danger of that is that I think sometimes we can become, when you've been in it too long, there's a danger of becoming, like you said, like almost too callous and too removed.
Or you just have to turn, or you have to turn your own.
That's another form of.
You can also have to sub-compartmentalize yourself so much that you kind of have to disconnect to survive there. Do you find, Ruth, as you're talking to these organizations, do you find that there's a real struggle between burnout and maybe even disconnecting to the point that you kind of have to almost turn off your humanity to be able to survive? And so you kind of, I guess the word would be deny,
I don't know. That's kind of a leading question.
I know. I just feel like you can be there so long and you go, man, I can't. You just almost wish you could shut your eyelid, and go, Calgon, take me away. It was an old commercial.
I think the good workers don't turn that off. Like the ones that are really doing really beneficial work don't, because you have to not, like, at the same time.
But to do that,
is a balance.
But you would have to be able to pull out and make sure you take care of yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically to be able to manage and process that on an incoming basis. I know Daniel and Steffi do an amazing job at getting their people away. They get downtime and away time, and they do a good job of their workers at getting them out and getting holiday and fun time and separation, because you just need to live sometimes too. You can't live in that world 24/7, 365, even though some people are trapped in that world 24/7, 365. The workers that need to get people out and be a part of that, it's a real challenging, because I would think the burnout would be high. Go ahead.
Could you tell us again what your focus in your paper was? It was the connection, or
my focus is on the relationship between these organizations and the churches, and
American churches.
That's right.
And did you expect to find that to be a negative thing or a positive thing? Did you not really have an opinion going in?
I mean, I tried not to have any expectations going in. That's the nice thing about ethnographic research, is that you're just trying to paint a fuller picture of what's going on. You don't need to necessarily bring in, I mean, I had my impressions for sure based on what I've experienced and what I was kind of reading in like preliminary papers and stuff. But I mean, relating that to what you were just saying, Pastor Troy, like a lot of the people I've talked to who are Christians themselves, like, have talked about the role that faith plays in their work and like propelling them through it, giving them the strength when they don't have it themselves to keep doing this work, the hope that is not always present in these situations.
Absolutely.
Kind of faith propels you and hope's not. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, but not necessarily seen. Faith can propel you through those moments. I think if it weren't for Christ and my relationship and knowing that there was hope there, I would have probably just swam off into the Gulf of Thailand and just never been seen again. Faith kind of gets you up and says, hey, God could use you.
Yeah.
Here, will you respond? Here I am, Samuel. Here I am. Send me. God's using you to kind of create a conversation. He's using Haley to create a conversation that'll shape people's minds on this for generations to come.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. God,
And I think it's about like taking those emotions and like fueling them in a healthy manner to like move. Like I think that there's really good example for biblical compassionate action, and I think that is that model is the more that we, for me as a person of faith, the more I push into that, it really does help. Like you said, like a lot of things can be self-motivated, and like when trying to center myself and like, because it's a constant, like I think it's a constant thing that you have to like continually recheck your motivations and address things that bubble up inside you, or maybe you do have some level of secondary trauma that's needing to address, all these things. Like, but I think ultimately when you have this faith that like it in this greater purpose and this greater hope, it calls you outside of yourself.
you definitely though need
And
to
it
monitor your
helps
oil
those
pressure and
things.
your dipstick as you do this kind of
Yeah.
work. You've got to take care of yourself. And I think what you're saying there, Ruth, is making sure your faith is solid, it's healthy, you're maintaining those parameters, and that'll drive you when you can't necessarily see when you're out of the shallows, you're into the deep here. It's your faith that kind of keeps you fixed on where you got to go.
And that's not to say, I mean, I've spoken to people who work for non-Christian
Right.
organizations as well who, have incredible strength and, and everyone has something that is able to kind of like pull them back and
Right.
ground them. But, in the Christian workers I've talked to, like that's definitely a common theme.
Let me dig in for a second here on your stuff here. When you look at the paths and discoveries that you're finding here, what for you have you found to be the primary form or paths of the trafficking you're seeing in the Thailand area? What seems to be behind that? What are the main roots and the sources of how people are being put into that lifestyle? What are you seeing as the primary routes?
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is not really the focus of my research, and it's something that we talked about on previous episodes of the podcast, so don't want to be too repetitive.
Right.
But I think, the roots, like on a really deep level of where all this comes from, like I think a lot of it stems from poverty and just and maybe less so in Thailand than in other places, but I think the history of how those regions were treated in terms of like colonial, imperial legacies often leaves these kind of like destitute economic situations where, and like tourism and neocolonialism where people from the West like really over exoticize, for example, Asian women, or like see the East like orientalize it as this place of like all this sexual fantasy that they can go to fulfill. It creates this market that people who are in desperate situations can then take advantage of and kind of create this system that perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to think of the. I'm trying to
the
think of the
answer you're looking
word
for.
No. I think that's really brilliant what you just said. Actually, I'm trying to come up with the sociology word for that. You call it. It's transference and countertransference. In the psychology world, you have an issue and you need it, and then somebody kind of feels that off you, and they kind of get back. You have these marketers that have created this concept, and then the people there that are living there go, well, this is. They create a concept, throw an agenda out there. Another group says, well, I guess we'll be used. This is who we are now. So we'll fall into that. And now you
Yeah.
have that codependent formance, and it's almost a codependency that forms. It's a very unhealthy codependency. And there are some versions of codependence that can be positive when people are lifting each other up, and it's there's a dynamic flow. But in this case, there's not a dynamic flow. There's just a use of and a used up. And it just doesn't turn out good at all. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a little deeper question here. In Thailand, as you look at this and you look at your work, you see programs doing. What do you see good happening in Thailand in the work in the sex trafficking industry of fighting against that? And what do you see and where do you see vice versa, the major systemic failures, both in Thailand, but also in the work that your church is trying to do with Thailand in this, or churches are doing with organizations? Where do you see the good things and where do you see the systemic gaps that need to be met?
specifically for churches or
Yeah, well,
for
I mean, I guess
organizations
the
in
churches and
general?
the organizations
Are
there
you
that
talking
are,
about the relationship between the churches
yeah,
and the organizations?
yeah, where are the churches doing good things and positive things there that are coming through those organizations and they're healthy to the development of a better community? And where do you see that being a negative thing? Maybe it's actually not helping. You know?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll start with the negative things. It's usually a better way to go
Wise.
about it.
Yeah, it's wise.
And not all of this is exclusive to churches, but I think some of the things I've just heard from talking to different aid workers and people who are involved in this in Thailand is that a lot of people come in just with a lack of, they have a desire to help, but they have done no research and they don't have a sense of what kind of help is actually needed, and they come in with an agenda. This is exactly how we're going to do it. So I heard of an example of this group that like set up this really specific like 6-month model. Like we'll take in girls and we do these exact steps, 6 months, they're in and out. And someone who used to work for them was saying like that it's
Factory line.
yeah, it's obviously trauma works so differently for everyone, and sometimes you
Oh,
need
yeah.
So you don't think every sex
Years.
trafficking worker has the exact same problems and crisis and can be fixed the exact same way in the
Yeah, I
same amount
mean,
of time?
yeah.
Right. Because these are human beings or individuals, right?
That's
Right,
quite a
right.
concept. But
Golly, really?
yeah, and I
Wow.
think the other thing we talked about in some other episodes is this is more specific to churches, is churches will say like, we need you to do more evangelizing. We need you to require every girl who comes through this program to do a Bible study, to come to your church every Sunday. That's what we want to see. We want to know you're spreading the gospel. And they kind of forget that the purpose of these organizations is obviously that, that's a part of it, but it's not just to make people pray the prayer and become a Christian. It's to help them escape from this life.
You're
of
just
trafficking.
substituting a new form of product into the
Exactly.
rather than liberating people to be able to make a real free will choice of their own. Yeah,
Exactly.
It becomes almost counter exploitive. Would you agree?
I would say so.
So the dangerous thing you see is churches coming in I think we talked about this episode as well, with good intentions, but not godly intentions. They're not thought out. They're not developed out. And all of a sudden they're substituting basically what they think is the evil they're fighting with maybe even a new evil, which is a new load of luggage.
There's just no, they think that they know everything, and there's no, they just want to hear the sound of their own voice. They just want to raise money and
we're certain we're right.
Good.
If you do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah,
then you're
there's-
going to be happy and perfect.
Yeah, there's no
Right.
understanding of what's going on, no
Right.
effort to like,
No
I mean,
dues.
another thing is when they don't hire Thai people to
work with them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The best organizations are the one that are founded, completely staffed by Thais. Like it makes a
that
huge
are living
difference.
there.
Yes.
And
Right.
I totally agree, because what separates, I think, the Community Faith Church Thai family, we have churches over there, from what I call the other churches over there, is most of those other churches are pastored by American, British, Australian pastors that are there as expats, and they got a church so the tourists can come to church.
And you can leave whenever you
want. When your
Right.
visa's up, COVID, go home. We'll see you next year. But all of our pastors in Thailand are 100% Thai.
Yeah.
They're Thai indigenous, and I did some training on doctrine and theology with them and stuff, but I had to learn back from them how to communicate that and how that would look to the Thai people. And I didn't
And then eventually you turned it over to them.
I did. We got them
communicate
trained
that.
with the basics of theology, because the Bible is the Bible. So they took that. But then how I would communicate that from an American perspective was one way. And the good thing is I had a couple of very high level English speaking Thai pastors in the early stage, and they were able to say, Pastor, that simile doesn't work here.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what would work here. And they were able to modify and fix that. And when we taught the next 26 pastors, they did the teaching.
Right.
And they were able to take the theology of the gospel that's the same everywhere and put it in a Thai cultural sense that makes it so much more effective and ready to embrace and love on the Thai people.
And I think you're touching on something that like it is a broad issue amongst like any philanthropic like activity that the church does, and like it's specifically like if we're specifically talking to about the American church does through the guise of missions, that like that unwillingness to learn, or this kind of error of thinking that the way that we have done things in our particular culture in our nation is the way to do things, has been problematic across the board for a very long time. And it's not just in this like particular field, but I think again, like you said, like when you're working with a vulnerable people group, you can't afford to like make those kinds of errors and hurt those people even more.
Okay, well, let's go to the other side real quick before we wrap up this cast, and then we're going to come back in part 3, and we're going to dig into. All right, we got 3 bonus questions, and over here on my notes, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seriously deep questions for our big round table around. You're going to love that. But let me ask the question: what are some things you're seeing good? Let's talk. It's easy to talk about negative. What are some positive aspects you're seeing?
Yeah, I think in terms of the relationships between churches and organizations, like I think some of the more valuable things that I've seen churches do that are really important to the people who are working in Thailand and running these organizations, Christian or otherwise, is having someone there long term. And so whether that's, a missionary who's affiliated with your church, someone who, you send someone to work for that organization who's affiliated with your church, like that makes a huge difference to have a constant presence there, to have constant communication.
Right.
And I think really long term is the key here. You can't go in and out, bring like a totally different group of people, like no consistency once every other year. And, other than that, just send money. I think that can often be more damaging than it is helpful. And so when churches take the time to really understand the situation that's going on, act with care, really learn what the best ways to support the organization are, like don't put insane constraints on money, like we only want it to be used for this when that might not be what they need right now. They might need money to fill people's salaries, not specifically to, do this program.
Right.
Yeah, those are some of the things.
I think that's really good. We're going to dig much deeper. We're going to get into the Christian churches and involvement in our next episode as we lead off that. But I think there's some really positive things there too. I think if you're out there and you're thinking our church needs to get involved in this, I think what I hear Ruth saying is we don't need you to run over and just do a quick short-term missionary trip.
You should
there.
actively not do that.
Yeah. And we're not saying
Please
don't take a group and do that, but do some research, find an organization that you see the light of Christ. And there's Tamar Center, great organization. You can work through YWAM, different organizations. It's okay to take some people and have the experience they need to have it, but make sure you go over and go spend some time with the organization and don't go with an agenda.
No, you can go serve the organization.
Go serve them.
Let the organization establish the need, not you establish the need and
serve
go
their
and try and
needs.
fill it.
Yes.
Go find out about their culture. Go on an exploration trip before Moses.
And don't go unless they want you there.
Exactly. Absolutely. Moses and them, before they tried to go in the promised land, they sent a recruiting group in. They kind of go around and kind of know about the land and learn about the people. Go over and learn about the people, get to experience them a little bit. See if your heart's really there. Can your heart connect? And then go see what you could do to be useful to them, not useful to you. So go check that out.
And if it's not going to be useful, you shouldn't be going, like you said.
Just write them a check and send them some money.
If you're going to be burdensome, it's not.
Yeah.
They're already doing so much.
They need people. They want people to go. It's okay to do an exploratory trip, but make sure you pick a good organization. Go find out. Let them know that you're wanting there to learn, and go learn. Don't go with agenda. Don't go with the plan. You don't know the project yet. Go study to show that self-approved, a workman unashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Go study. And then when you get there, as you develop it, maybe you've got people interested in longer-term relationships. That's fine. Plug them in. Don't just go try to start a ministry. Thailand is a difficult place to get into. It's difficult to get long-term visas right now. It's difficult to learn to speak the language if you don't know the language. If you don't know the language, you're not going to be able to stay there long-term. You're going to have to, if you're going to go do something in Thailand long-term, you need to start taking classes right now someplace, and it's going to take you a while to learn that to be effective. So what you can do better is find the right organizations that are doing that. Maybe pair people up in your church that could go for a longer period of time to help teach English, but at the same time they can learn. They could go over and teach a subject. If it's Tamar Center, they could go and help. Maybe a beautician could go over and spend a year teaching the girls how to do hair at the same time learning the culture. There's a lot of ways you can help. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. You can find good organizations doing it. Figure out how you can walk alongside them and add benefit to their work
in good practical ways.
Not Grandma Ruth gave you $1,000 and she wants you to go to those foreign people and build them a little house over there because they need a house. Those people don't have a house. You don't need any agendas. Just go find out what you can do. Experiencing God said, go to where God is, go to where you're going, and sit down and find out what God wants you to experience there. Go get good organizations and just be open to the Holy Spirit. I think the Holy Spirit will show you if you don't go in with your own agenda. The Holy Spirit will open a whole world of opportunity to you. And I think it'll begin to prick your heart, and then that'll lead to the longer term relationships and get to know people first.
Yeah, that communication aspect is I think, key. It's open communication, because I think oftentimes NGOs feel like they maybe can't have these honest in necessary conversations to groups who are funding them,
Right.
where like, oh, this is exceedingly burdensome to us, but people don't ask the right questions or try to spend time in the
right.
communication aspect and that relationship building.
And
is
NGOs
really
that are
important.
strapped, NGOs over there that are strapped for money, and some group comes in, they want to pour a bunch of money, and nobody wants to say no to the money. They need it. They're desperate. And so
Daniel's done a good job of this. 7 years ago, he said he came in and he stopped all short-term mission
Yes, he
trips
did.
unless
Yes,
there
he
are
did.
long-term
Yeah,
relationships.
yeah. And even though they're deep term and YWAM, he really redefined what the expectations were for that. You're coming in to
sure.
serve, and you're going to do these
Because
projects.
it can just wear them out. They end up spending so
I
much
saw
time
that.
and energy hosting groups
That they're
are
not
coming
working
in.
on
I
their
saw
own
it
work.
exhausting
Right.
now of them just to fulfill every. It was like they were coming to Tamar Center to have Fantasy Island,
Right.
you know, their own experience, and they've really changed it. Tamar Center is a good place. If you want to talk to them, they will vet you very well, and they will. If you'll listen, they'll tell you ways in which you can help and get involved. There's a lot of good organizations out there, and you can check that out. We're going to be back in episode 3. It's going to be a roundtable discussion. It's going to be an absolute barn burner. We're going to get into our U.S. churches, what we can do. You're hearing a little bit about that, being authentic and doing the right thing. So come back for that if you would. You've got Ruth here, and Ruth's email address is on the screen there. You can check that out. If you've got anything you want to maybe contribute to her studies, you've got, about ministries, organizations, churches doing unique things, feel free to send that to her. She's not interested in knowing that you sing soprano or bass, but she would love to hear about your work in anti-human trafficking, sex trafficking, especially if you got a church or something doing unique work. Please let her know that, because she's developing a great paper, and we're excited about what you're doing. Ruth, thank you so much.
Thank
Haley,
you so much for being here.
yeah.
Thank you for
Beth,
having
thank
me.
you. You guys have been very deep stuff. We'll be back in podcast number 3 of this series, the U.S. Church Anti-Human Trafficking series, our roundtable signature roundtable discussion. We always do that on the dock as we get ready to get away from it. We want to throw the kitchen sink at you, Ruth. We're going to do that. So come back
Maybe
and.
she's got a few kitchen sink questions herself.
No, she can't. She has to have me on her show. Everybody, thanks for joining us. You can find out more about On the Dock at onthedock.org. You can email us for info. If you want Ruth that email address, email us at info@onthedock.org. We'll send you the information directly. You can find us on our podcast partners, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Facebook, Roku, Rumble, and Sermonette. And we'd love to hear your contact on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Telegram. Give us a shout out. I think they've said some really good things. If you're a church and you're really interested in doing more here, and you just want to massage that a little bit, don't just run and do it. Reach out to us, and we'll get you in contact with somebody who can help you kind of work through those ideas and do the right thing on that, and to help you develop those long-term relationships. Once you find our social media platforms and our platforms, make sure you hit subscribe, like, notify, and share this podcast with other people so they can learn too. We want to all grow it together and get off the dock and get out in the deep. We're going to do that together, and we always want you to be our Patreon partner or sponsor. We'd love to have you. Hey, Cape Air, come on. We'd love to have you as our sponsor. We're not going to talk about you in the next episode until you actually get on Patreon and become a sponsor or a partner. We'd love to have you. And finally, if you're in the Marion, Southern Illinois area, we'd love to have you. If you don't have a church home already, we'd love to have you at Community Faith Church, 10 o'clock on Sundays. Wednesday at 6:30, we're the host church here for the On the Dock studio, and we'd love to see you. If you can't get here, we've got an incredible virtual campus at coftv.com. You can watch us on Facebook and through YouTube through the Community Faith Church channel. We'd love to have you here. If you don't have that place already, we'd love to connect with you as well. And so again, ladies, thank you so much. Ruth, Haley, Mother Beth, great job. We'll see you back real soon in episode number 3. We'll be the roundtable discussion. Don't miss it. Get some coffee ready, and we'll see you at the next episode of On the Dock.